The Idries Shah Foundation podcast. Practical Psychology for Today. Featuring the works of Idries Shah, voiced by David Ault. Welcome to the Idries Shah Foundation podcast. In this edition of the podcast, we will hear selections from Wisdom of the Idiots by Idries Shah. This audio is made available by the Idries Shah Foundation. The Sheikhs of the Skullcaps. Bahauddin Naqshband was approached by the sheikhs of the 4 Sufi groups in India, Egypt, Turkey or Rum, and Persia. They asked him, in eloquently worded letters, to send them teachings which they could impart to their followers. Bahauddin first said, "What I have is not new. You have it and do not use it correctly. Therefore you will simply say when you receive my messages, 'These are not new.'" The sheikhs replied, "With respect, we believe that our disciples will not think thus." Bahauddin did not reply to these letters, but read them in his assemblies, saying, "We at a distance will be able to see what happens. Those who are in the midst of it will not, however, make the effort to see what is happening to them." Then the sheikhs wrote to Bahauddin and asked him to give some token of his interest. Bahauddin sent 1 small skullcap, the arakia, for each student, telling their sheikhs to distribute them as from him, without saying what the reason might be. He said to his assembly, "I have done such and such a thing. We who are far will see what those who are near to events will not see." Now he wrote, after a time, to each of the sheikhs, asking them whether they had abided by his wishes, and what the result had been. The sheikhs wrote, "We have abided by your wishes." But as to the results, the Sheikh of Egypt wrote, "My community eagerly accepted your gift as a sign of special sanctity and blessing, and as soon as the caps were distributed, each person regarded them as of the greatest inner significance, and as carrying your mandate." The Sheikh of the Turks wrote, on the other hand, "The community regard your cap with great suspicion. They imagine that it betokens your desire to assume their leadership. Some are afraid that you may even influence them from afar through this object." There was a different result from the Sheikh in India, who wrote, "Our disciples are in great confusion, and daily ask me to interpret to them the meaning of the distribution of arakias. Until I tell them something about this, they do not know how to act." The letter from the Sheikh of Persia said, "The result of your distribution of the caps has been that the seekers, content with what you have sent them, await your further pleasure, so that they may place at the disposal of your teaching and of themselves the efforts which should be made." Bahauddin explained to the audience of hearers in Bokhara, the dominant superficial characteristic of the people in the circles of India, Egypt, Turkey, and Persia was in each case manifested by the reactions of their members. Their behavior when faced with a trivial object such as a skullcap would have been exactly the same if they had been faced with me in person or with teachings sent by me. Neither the people nor their sheikhs have learnt that they must look among themselves for their choking peculiarities. They should not use these trivial peculiarities as methods to assess others. Among the disciples of the Persian sheikh there is a possibility of understanding, because they have not the arrogance to imagine that they understand that my caps will bless them, will threaten them, will confuse them. The characteristics here are, in the 3 cases, Egyptian hope, Turkish fear, and Indian uncertainty. Some of the epistles of Bahauddin Naqshband had meanwhile been copied as a pious act and distributed by well-meaning but unenlightened dervishes in Cairo, Hind, and the Persian and Turkey areas. They eventually fell into the hands of the circles surrounding these very sheikhs of the skullcaps. Bahauddin therefore asked one wandering Qalandar to visit each of these communities in turn, and to report to him how they felt about his epistles. This man said on his return, "They all said, 'This is nothing new. We are doing all these things already. Not only that, but we are basing our daily lives on them, and by our existing tradition, we keep ourselves occupied day in and day out with remembrance of these things.'" El Shah Bahauddin Naqshband thereupon called all his disciples together. He said to them, "You who are at a distance from certain events connected with these 4 sheikhly groupings will be able to see how little has been accomplished by the working of the knowledge among them. Those who are present there have learnt so little that they can no longer profit from their own experiences. Where, therefore, is the advantage of the daily remembrances and struggle? Make it a task to collect all the available information about this event. Inform yourselves of the whole story, including the exchange of letters and what I have said, as well as the report of the Qalandar here. Bear witness that we have offered the means whereby others could learn. Cause this material to be written down and studied, and let those who have been present witness it, so that, God willing, even reading about it might prevent such things happening frequently in future, and might even enable it to come to the eyes and the ears of those who were so powerfully affected by the action of inactive skullcaps. The Secret of the Locked Room. Ayaz was the boon companion and slave of the great conqueror Mahmud the Idol-breaker, monarch of Ghazna. He had first come to the court as a beggarly slave, and Mahmud had made him his adviser and friend. The other courtiers were jealous of Ayaz, and observed his every movement, intending to denounce him for some shortcoming, thus encompassing his downfall. One day these jealous ones went to Mahmud and said, "Shadow of Allah upon earth, know that, indefatigable as always in your service, we have been keeping your slave Ayaz under close scrutiny. We have now to report that every day as soon as he leaves the court, Ayaz goes into a small room where nobody else is ever allowed. He spends some time there, and then goes to his own quarters. We fear that this habit of his may be connected with a guilty secret. Perhaps he consorts with plotters even who have designs upon your Majesty's life." For a long time Mahmud refused to hear anything against Ayaz, but the mystery of the locked room preyed upon his mind until he felt that he had to question Ayaz. One day, when Ayaz was coming out of his private chamber, Mahmud, surrounded by courtiers, appeared and demanded to be shown into the room. "No," said Ayaz. "If you do not allow me to enter the room, all my confidence in you as trustworthy and loyal will have evaporated, and we can never thenceforward be on the same terms. Take your choice," said the fierce conqueror. Ayaz wept, and then he threw open the door of the room and allowed Mahmud and his staff to enter. The room was empty of all furniture. All that it contained was a hook in the wall. On the hook hung a tattered and patched cloak, a staff, and a begging bowl. The king and his court were unable to understand the significance of this discovery. When Mahmud demanded an explanation, Ayaz said, "Mahmud, for years I have been your slave, your friend and counselor. I have tried never to forget my origins, and for this reason I have come here every day to remind myself of what I was. I belong to you, and all that belongs to me is my rags, my stick, my bowl, and my wandering over the face of the earth." The Miracle of the Royal Dervish. It is related that the Sufi master Ibrahim ben Adam was sitting one day in a forest clearing when two wandering dervishes approached him. He made them welcome, and they talked of spiritual matters until it was dusk. As soon as night fell, Ibrahim invited the travellers to be his guests at a meal. Immediately they accepted. A table laid with the finest foods appeared before their eyes. "How long have you been a dervish?" one of them asked Ibrahim. 2 years, he said. "I have been following the Sufi path for nearly 3 decades, and no such capacity as you have shown us has ever manifested itself to me," said the man. Ibrahim said nothing. When the food was almost finished, a stranger in a green robe entered the glade. He sat down and shared some of the food. All realized by an inner sense that this was Hida, the immortal guide of all the Sufis. They waited for him to impart some wisdom to them. When he stood up to leave, Hida simply said, "You two dervishes wonder about Ibrahim. But what have you renounced in order to follow the dervish path? You gave up the expectations of security and an ordinary life. Ibrahim ben Adam was a mighty king and threw away the sovereignty of the Sultanate of Balkh to become a Sufi. This is why he is far ahead of you. During your 30 years, too, you have gained satisfactions through renunciation itself. This has been your payment. He has always abstained from claiming any payment for his sacrifice." And the next moment, Hida was gone. This podcast is copyright 2016, the Idries Shah Foundation.